One thing I want to ask actually, because again, this is something that people might not understand about like this, the time period is first of all,
Hmm.
as you pointed out, like the story about the Rusty guy. That's another thing is the reason why later, for example, when people like Immortal come along, that was like a big story is because I mean, I was like a 16-year-old kid at this time, mate. And as you can imagine, like my parents didn't just let me go on the internet all the time. You know, I had to sneak in there, go on the connection, pay per minute and stuff. So actually, average gamers were older. And then it was
Hmm.
people where, like, this is what I want to ask about is in the modern day, obviously people use that buzzword all the time, toxicity, and like they don't want anyone to be mean on the internet and stuff. But like, it was kind of almost like a pick up basketball mentality back then, right? It was like,
It
if you're going to
was.
play, people are going to talk shit. And if you can't handle it, it's like, that's part of the game. You know, it's kind of like, it was dog eat dog world, right?
It was. Yeah, no, it definitely was. And basketball is a great analogy because I played basketball for almost 10 years of my life and it was my favorite sport, and so I think that and I love professional tennis too, and I think that the reason why I love professional tennis is because it's a one-on-one sport, and I always really was more gravitated towards I like being having no one else to hold accountable for my success
Right.
or failure than myself, and that was why I always gravitated to being a dueler. But there really was something special, and I had the most success in my career, as being part of a team, and I think that it definitely was a doggy dog world. I think it definitely was. I mean, you hear about professional athletes and basketball stars, and Michael Jordan was known for being a huge asshole, and I think that we all had that streak in us. You have to have a certain level of cockiness in you to, um, you know, give yourself a compartmentalized belief that you can win, and that you deserve to win, and definitely a lot of that bled through in competition. And then going back to commenting on the sort of modern era of you know I think that a lot of things that are wrong in the world today happen to do. I grew up from a different era. I'm 42 years old, so I grew up in the 90s. I went to school in the late 80s and early 90s, and it was a different time. It was a rougher time. People would get in fights at school. I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen anymore, but like, I felt like there was, you could always be held accountable for being an asshole and for what you
Well,
said
yes. Yes.
by getting a punch in the face, or
Certainly, yeah.
like, and I think that a lot of people have never really experienced. Like, I've had my ass kicked numerous times in my life, usually
I
not
mean,
much,
dude,
but
even in the online aspect, like you might talk shit to
yeah,
someone. If you go to the LAN next time, well, it wasn't a big esports event. Like that guy might just punch you in the head there.
right.
You
And
know?
I had numerous. I think that was one of the interesting things about me is I kind of broke the mold, and this was one of the things that I was really proud of my history being involved in esports is I was a little bit of a broke the mold because I was a basketball player. My family was in surfing, and I was into fitness, and I kind of had this persona that I knew was attractive to the PGL when they signed me, and I was put in front of the local media a lot to sort of advocate for competitive gaming and gamers because at the time the narrative that the media was running with was that gamers were these dysfunctional people that were in the cellars of their parents' house.
Yes.
And
It's
I
basically the
remember
Columbine angle, right? It's like they're all just
exactly the
weirdos and yeah,
Columbine thing, and
exactly.
so I remember that was one of the things that the league liked was that I was well spoken, I was a good ambassador, I was well rounded. I brought the analogy of sports into esports, and I painted
Right.
that picture for people is that I have played basketball. I know what it feels like to be a team. I know what it feels like to and I get that same camaraderie, I get that same drive, and I get that same sense of team and that same rush, for lack of a better way of describing it, from sports that I did from esports, and that's when I knew that it was a legitimate thing, and I wasn't going to let anyone tell me that it wasn't, and I advocated very very hard. A that it was a sport. B that it wasn't just a bunch of introverted people with dysfunctional character
Yes.
personality characteristics, and see that this was a group of talented people more so than just one person, and that eventually as this grew it would tell that story is that there were other great teams. And I never felt a vested interest in trying to tell the media that no, like Thresh is the best player in the world and he's leaps and bounds above everyone else, even though he was clearly, notches ahead of other people.
Yeah.
But I think the margin between some of the great players, and you started to see it when, Immortals, came in, and I think myself, I was considered to be one of the better duelers in the world at one point, and I just, even B2 and Reptile, I mean, some of these people, they had their own play styles, but I
Yes.
think that, Reptile proved to me that, I felt like that I, 9 times out of 10 would beat him, but he had the ability to throw you off, and he caught me by surprise in I think it was a PGL tournament, and Immortal obviously, um, knocked out Thresh, and yeah, I mean, it's just that those were the things that I think, I was kind of advocating. The gamers were normal, that it was a sport that could support more than one superstar, and that there were other
Yes.
people who were worth paying attention to. And I think that maybe I enjoyed some extra presence in the spotlight because I was just a different character, and I had a sports background, and I
Right.
was sort of deployed to tell that story to the media. And
Well,
I'm
one
glad
thing
that
you'll
I'm
get,
glad that I
yeah.
did.
One thing you're getting at here, which actually, yeah, I'd like to expand on a little bit, is because here's the thing, like, even though I come from England, like, as you can imagine, when you grow up, like, you see American movies and stuff, so I know a lot of the, like, reference points that maybe people might have missed. So what I always told people is this, because even until maybe, I would say maybe like 10 years ago, mate, a lot of the media that you would talk to, where they'd never really heard what esports was, they would just hear like this. Like, if you went to the CPL, for example, they'd go, oh, so there's a really big tournament in Dallas, and all the gamers are going to fly in and they're going to play each other. And I could tell, dude, that what they were thinking in their brain was that 80s movie, The Wizard. They
Right.
were thinking,
Yeah.
right, it's just people who've just played at home. There's no scene, there's no circuit. It's not a sport. They're just going. It's a big tournament. They go there, like the World Series of Poker, you could give the analogy. People just go there and they don't know how good they are. They enter. And then at the end, they think whoever won, so if this case it was Thresh, they think it's like, right, he was just dubbed the best gamer, but today it was a one-off thing. Like what you're kind of pointing out is, even back then, there was a scene and there was a circuit of tournaments. There might have just been LAN parties, and you knew people from other competitions, and it was kind of like, I mean, to give the analogy there, it's kind of like the tennis circuit, right? People in your area and on your level, and you've had your battles, and basically that's the kind of thing that the media guys didn't get right.
No, they didn't get that at all, and I think that was I think that some elements of what you're talking about is definitely the reason why we did some things. Obviously, I'm sure we'll probably talk about GGL a little bit, but
Yes.
GGL I think was one of the greatest advocates for esports in the gaming community, while simultaneously being the most misunderstood by the community, because there were reasons why the company did things that it did, to break down barriers about competition and to bring more people into the fold, and to try to develop it into more events all the time, and to give points for participating into it, and bring in the Hollywood celebrities. A lot of people thought that was just
Gimmicky or whatever,
a
yeah.
gimmicky thing, but
Yes.
it absolutely made a difference. At one of our tournaments, the Digital Life that we did for Ziff Davis, we had PR people, and we brought in Jessica Alba, and we got a controller in her hand.
Oh,
And
I
she
can
was a
imagine not get
genuine
loads more media people to pay attention,
fan of
right?
gaming, and getting Snoop Dogg involved for the Hip Hop Gaming League, and aligning ourselves with the Gravity Games, which was a competitor to the X Games. And
Right.
the problem was, what people saw is that it was, they looked at it like it was watering down gaming, and not
Yes.
keeping the focus on it. But what people needed to understand is that gaming needed to stand side by side with some of the other organizations that had already gone through some years of evolution, and to bring in, we brought in a lot of the BMX players and the motocross players,
Right.
and they were watching what was going on, and they had a respect for it,
Yeah.
and they were and they became advocates for it too, and so a lot of the things that I think look gimmicky with GGL, were done with the best of intentions. And the older people, because GGL was formed by Hakeem, myself, and a money guy named Ted Owen, and he knew that there was something special about video gaming and that he saw it kind of as a sport. But Amir and I kind of gave him, the lowdown on what was going on in the actual competitive gaming world, and what was happening with the World Cyber Games, and I think that merging those two things was powerful, but at the same time too, we had to raise money. We spent a lot of money at GGL, trying to push not just esports, but I'd say gaming culture forward. A lot of the stuff that you saw with um, building a studio out and doing content out of the studio daily, and committing to spend the resources to do live stream video. That was where people like DJ Wheat became involved, and sort of spearheaded all of that for us. And the commitment to do play-by-play match coverage we thought was critical, because us as players, when we had someone covering us like DJ Wheat and Red Eye and Tosspot, and the people, it made us feel more special, and I think that you could probably get some really interesting feedback from NBA players and professional athletes having gone through this period of COVID right now, where they're playing for cardboard cutouts in
Sure.
the stands, and they know that they're being broadcast out, to millions of people. But it's different not having that energy to feed off of. And I think that just being able to know that there were hundreds of people watching our matches that were hearing that play by play, that's where another thing that really made it sort of cement in my mind that was going to be what the format was for this, that was necessary to continue to draw in more mainstream people. And there was a balance that always had to be, and they did such a great job with it. I think that that's where DJ Weed excelled the most over everyone, was that he had an ability to make the coverage compelling, to give it that, adapt that sports sort of commentation to it, but also educate and not be exclusive, not just talk to the hardcore. He
Yes.
had a great ability to bring in people who were mainstream, and tease at the fact that, plant the seed in their head where they could say, hey, this actually does, it quacks like a duck. It looks, like this thing looks and feels, and it has some of those elements of being a sport. And I think that there were a lot of people who were really instrumental into driving that forward.